Okay, folks. So Israel struck Rafah over the weekend. Obviously, the details of that are horrific. We covered that in previous streams this week. But here's Morning Joe and Richard Haas having a discussion about, should Rafah really be the red line? I mean, really, what would we expect Israel to do? How would we react in this situation? Very strange shift in rhetoric once again from the Morning Joe people. They might have the chips in their brains. I'm starting to suspect something, that they're being programmed. Let's hear a little bit of this.
What is Israel to do? Are they supposed to just sit there while conditions in Rafah get worse? While the possibility of famine spreads, and while Hamas regroups. Let's just state the obvious. The United States would never do this. We didn't do this in Mosul. We didn't do this in Afghanistan. We didn't do this in Iraq. We didn't do this in Vietnam. We didn't do this in World War II. If we were struck, we struck back until we won the war. So
look at all that napalm we dropped on all those innocent civilians. We melted those people.
Yeah.
So why do we have a problem with this?
And we won the war, right? We won the Vietnam War, right?
We won.
Oh, no, we lost.
Wait.
And we were responding to an attack from Vietnam on our soil, right? Oh, no. Vietnam never attacked us. Yeah. Iraq never attacked us. Afghanistan never attacked us. The 9/11 hijackers were Saudis. But we struck back. And we won. We just pulled out of Afghanistan. Within 10 minutes, the fucking Taliban was back in power. So what are you talking about? We struck back. What are you talking about? We stayed in there until we won the war. None of that is true. This is why. This is why. So when some troll does an AI rendering of a Karine Jean-Pierre press conference where she says that we allied with Ukraine to win World War II, this is how you can fall for a thing like that, because this is real, and this is very slightly less ridiculous than that. I mean, what a ridiculous retelling of history to say, hey, how would we react as the United States if we were attacked? We would go back into Vietnam. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan? First of all, we didn't win those wars. Second of all, those countries never attacked us. So what the hell are you even talking about?
And he goes on these crazy rants, and Mika just kind of nods and stays silent. I was honestly watching this clip, and I've thought this before, but especially since we saw the Brzezinski call Joe a moron, basically, who doesn't know what he's talking about. This is a downside to having kids. Your kids reflect on you, and they can really be an embarrassment. I would imagine Brzezinski was very embarrassed by what his daughter ended up being, playing second fiddle to this fucking goon on this show. Yeah. This idiot. It's not even like they go back and forth. She just kind of like is this submissive housewife, right?
And she fell for him on the show.
Says.
Yeah, they weren't like dating before. This was
that's
this was a Me Too that worked out.
That's what Michelle Wolf said. That's a Me Too that worked out.
Exactly.
I guess what confuses me is what is it? Is it in the United States or Israel's best interest that Israel just sits outside of Rafah and this suffering continues indefinitely? Or do they go in and kill Hamas terrorists?
Here's a dilemma, Joe.
As if those are the two options. Yeah, we sit back and we let the people starve, or we go in and we kill everybody. Yeah, those are the only two options here. What about a negotiated ceasefire with a full hostage exchange, kind of like the ones that have been offered several times, that Israel has turned down several times? What about that? No? Now we have two options? Yeah.
Pshaw.
Yeah. Total outer space talk. All right, so here's Richard Haas. So he throws to Richard Haas.
Israel has obviously decided to continue to degrade Hamas. There's some major military elements of Hamas left. But here's the but. In the course of doing it, you had this sort of incident the other day where 40-plus innocents got killed. That's inevitable. That's, as Mr. Rumsfeld once said, stuff happens, awful stuff happens, and that sort of thing is going to happen again and again. This further isolates Israel, further builds anti-Israeli feeling in this country and around the world, makes it impossible for the Saudis to normalize, becomes a recruiting tool for future generations of Palestinians. and it still doesn't solve the problem of what comes next. So the question the administration has to ask, it's not whether Israel crossed the red line. That seems to me too technical, too narrow.
Too
the
narrow.
real question is this still wise?
Oh.
Is this worth it? Is this helping Israel? Is this helping the United States? So the question is not how Israel's going about it now. The real question is whether it still makes sense. And I think the United States has to really raise the question, should we be supporting a ceasefire, that the benefits of this Israeli operation don't outweigh the cost. Obviously, you're not going to get any hostages back so long as this gets on. And it's still not going to deal with the fundamental challenge of how to govern Gaza, much less the West Bank. So I actually think the first order question is not this red line issue. I think for the administration is whether to come out publicly against what Israel's doing. The Israelis are going to say, if we do that, we've got to finish the job. The Republicans are going to say that. The problem with that argument, Joe, this is a job that cannot be finished. Israel continues to fight a conventional war in an unconventional setting. So I'm not sure that what they're doing, ultimately, the benefits will justify the costs.
It's just incredible that you could say, well, this issue of a red line is a technical issue, as the B-roll you're playing is literally burnt corpses.
Yes.
Like, what do you mean that it's a technical issue? I have some video that I want to play because we played this in early April. Here's Richard Haas after the WCK kitchen murders.
Benjamin Netanyahu give a damn that Joe Biden is upset, frustrated, and outraged by what he's seeing? And if not, what would make him give a damn?
No, he doesn't. And indeed, increasingly, he's trying to position himself as someone in front of the Israeli body politic saying, you may not like me. You may think I made a mistake on October 7th, but I'm all that stands between you and American pressure. So he doesn't care. What would he care about? He would care about damaging the relationship with Israel's most important benefactor. And that would mean the United States, I'm sorry to say, I'm sorry it's come to this, Willie, that we have to basically have some sanctioning of what Israel did. Not just the stuff in the UN. It's got to be conditioning arms deliveries, and it's got to be, I would think, some trade sanctions, for example,
Israel
against
basically
goods.
needs to kill Europeans.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, if you look at what the Chiron says under that screen, this was in the aftermath of some Europeans who were killed. And that was obviously a tragedy. It was obviously a crime. We don't say that to
We're not in
downplay
any
them.
way denigrating them.
No, not at all. Not at all. Those people are, 100 times the heroes I'll ever be.
Yes.
Yes. But the fact is, this is the kind of response you get. It's not so technical when Europeans get killed, right? Right? Now he's out there advocating for sanctions.
Yep.
Sanctions. Here's Morning Joe around that same time. This clip we've seen circulate a whole bunch. Here he is.
We've always known this. I mean, yeah, we know the charter. So let me ask you this question, and I can't get an answer, and maybe we're just not covering it in the press. Maybe you can help me out. Why did Benjamin Netanyahu send the head of Mossad to Doha 3 weeks before the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, and told Qatar to continue funding Hamas?
Mr. Tough Guy here. I'm going to play this for a few more seconds, but notice same Chiron at the bottom. This was in the aftermath of the World Central Kitchen murder.
Yep.
I think, if anything, October 7 shattered that concept. And it's my understanding.
But you just said you always knew they were Nazis. I always knew they were Nazis. I would never give. We were always angry that Qatar funded Hezbollah and Hamas. I want to know, why did Benjamin Netanyahu do that? Let me ask you this. Why did Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump know in 2018 the sources of Hamas's illicit funding, and they still did nothing? They wanted that money to get to Hamas. I'd like to know why, because we don't know in America. Have there been any investigations in Israel at this point?
I'm sure we'll investigate it, and I totally agree with you.
When?
That Qatar
money shot
is
here.
a wolf in sheep's clothes. And they're buying their in.
No. I must correct you. Benjamin
Please.
Netanyahu was asked by the leaders of Qatar, do you want us, Qatar, to give money to Hamas? This was in September. And Netanyahu's representative said, yes, of course. You're feeding that wolf, and you're telling that wolf to feed the Nazis in Gaza.
Big tough guy. 7 weeks ago. Richard Haas, big tough guy 7 weeks ago. So it's one or the other, and it's probably or a combination of both, which it probably is. When 5 Europeans are killed, it's an outrage. When 45 brown Arabs are killed in tents, it's a technical question. It's technical. Are we going to red line, not red line? That's technical. We have to run a cost-benefit analysis of this. That's more paramount than the fact that 45 innocent people were cooked alive in tents, right? The other thing is, I'm sorry.
Can you imagine? And hey, we don't traffic in knee-jerk charges of racism, but answer this question. What if that were 45 Europeans in those tents?
Of course. Those are 45 white
just
people
imagine
in those
it.
tents.
Imagine it. How would they react?
Yep.
So, yes, there is. It's what Chomsky calls worthy and unworthy victims. And one of the easiest ways to get placed as an unworthy victim is to not be white.
Indeed. And just a number 2 here, because we know, based on the 2016 WikiLeaks dumps, that the DNC has been in contact with MSNBC over the years, right? Chuck Todd got an angry email from Debbie Wasserman Schultz when he suggested they were being unfair to Sanders in that primary. They definitely are on script to a certain extent.
Sure.
Like this is fake.
Absolutely.
It's fake. How can you see a segment like this where he's talking about, look, I mean, we shouldn't worry too much about red lines, even though that was a huge story a few weeks ago. The president of the United States says Rafah is a red line. They go massacre people in Rafah, and we're just supposed to drop that and be cool-headed about this and think, well, what is really in our interest? Is it really in our interest to pursue this? Let's not get too hung up on the fact that they crossed the red line in broad daylight and murdered dozens of innocent people in the process. So far, this hasn't even gotten going yet. Israel says this is going to go on for 7 more months. That's their plan. We covered that on the show yesterday. But you don't go from that to here unless you have orders. You have orders. And to a certain extent, you don't need direct orders on MSNBC because they know where their bread is buttered. They know if they blackpill the audience against Biden too much, there goes their entire network. But they're definitely getting orders from somewhere. They're definitely on script. There's no way I could have showed you those 2 clips from 7 weeks ago and then have this clip make sense. Even racism aside, and that's a huge factor. I'm not saying that's not a factor. That may adjust the narrative. Like, you may get the order from on high. Okay, they killed white people, so we have to go hard at them this week.
Right.
Now it's not a red line anymore.
Well, we saw that in the way that they flipped, and we've said this a few times. It is our theory that the Biden administration, right when they took the dogs off the leash, that was when you got this after the World Kitchen bombing. They took off the leash, told their media people they could go ham on Israel, so to speak. and then when World War III was brewing with Iran, they cut a deal with Israel, and it was so clear that these news organizations got an order to flip back to the student protesters and to lay off Israel, because it happened immediately and simultaneously across different news organizations. They all just flipped immediately. And yeah, I mean, now they're back to this, although I've mentioned there are kind of mixed signals coming out of the media, which I think reflects a generational struggle inside these organizations. That's my theory, because you saw the CBS News guy ask a hard question yesterday of what's his name, Stephen Miller,
Matthew Miller,
Matthew Miller, ask him.
Well, no, that was John Kirby the other day, the most recent one.
Right. Where he asked him about
how many charred bodies are the same.
How many charred bodies? So it's not as uniform as one would expect. It was right after the Iran thing. It was very uniform.
Yes.
But you still, even at that time, you had these leaks coming out of the New York Times where clearly there was a resistance among what I think are probably mostly the younger people working at the Times against the narratives that were being pushed by the more senior editors. So I think that's part of why at times you get a mixed signal. But yeah, no, they definitely take orders. That old antagonism between reporters and the politicians they report on, that broke down a long time ago. I would say this would be an interesting thing to do, like a think piece on. It was, I believe it was Dan Rather who asked Reagan some hard questions and really got pilloried for it. It was kind of the beginning of this, where you have a reporter getting pilloried for asking the president some hard questions. And after Nancy Reagan died, he did Jimmy played this. He did an interview fondly remembering how after that he was kind of banished from interviewing Reagan, and how Nancy later on had a phone call with him basically making it clear to him, okay, you're going to behave now. And he bent the knee. And he told this as like a warm reminiscence about how Nancy protected Ronnie, not a reminiscence about how the news lost its autonomy for access.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a similar sort of dynamic here. I mean, it has to be. There's no other explanation for that kind of shift.
Please clap.